Have you given any thought to contributing to the Melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander.
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
Not so fast! Not so fast! I'll have to give the matter a little thought. Go away and come back tomorrow.
Tomorrow? Oh, but I want to go home now.
You've had plenty of time already.
Yeah. Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you were really great and powerful, you'd keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now.
Oh.
The great Oz has spoken.
Oh.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me.
You humbug!
Yes, it's exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
And that's very similar to the legal system in our country. What we call the legal system is made up of falsities and bluffs. Learning to navigate it in a way that even remotely benefits you can be as complicated as deciphering the most cryptic of Masonic rituals. And even then, it's a matter of trying different combinations of a variety of different techniques to see what works. Recently on The Melt, we've been trying to have conversations with people who are devoted to figuring out how to be free. Of course, everyone has their own definition as to what freedom means. But what we're trying to do is to gather information and first-hand experiences from people who have been there and put it to the test. The more I speak with these people, the more that I feel that I'm starting to grasp the vast topics of natural law, law merchant, and common law. Today's guest, Cal Washington, CEO and co-founder of the InPower Movement, has been through hell and high water to earn the knowledge and wisdom that he possesses today, and he joins us to talk about his personal experiences and what he's learned from them. I start off the conversation by asking Cal what brought him to all of this.
Well, I went through a divorce about 20 years ago and ended up in court. And the lawyers basically took our house and then dumped us, both of us, and we were kind of left self-litigant. And then through that, because I had to kind of immerse myself in it, not just pay a lawyer to deal with it, I had to be the one speaking, et cetera, on my own behalf. And that's when when you're interacting with the judges, things just didn't seem correct, like the way I thought it was from TV or whatever my preconceived idea of court was not happening in there. And so I just started asking questions because I was now the person talking, where before I saw some stuff, but I wasn't allowed to talk because the lawyer did it. So it was just that. And then some of the answers that I got, and that led me to try and figure out what was happening in there, and which led to, from one guru to the next, or one sort of body of teaching to the next. And I tried everything and, tried to learn as much as I could. And I paid the price for a lot of it, because a lot of it didn't work, but I got in there and tried it. And then I went to a seminar on commerce, and that's when the light bulbs really went off, because I was already had seen some stuff and had made some mistakes. And now in context, I could see that's why that happened like that, or that's why it's all making sense to me now. It was like click, click, click.
Yes.
And so as soon as I went, okay, well, this must be it, because this is making sense from what I've already experienced for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when we did the first commercial move, was my case, but I say there was a group of three of us really. And there was more, but three of us really worked together a lot. And the first commercial move, the judge ran out of the room. So that was like, had not seen that. And
Wow.
that's how I came to, they blinked really hard. So that's how I came to it.
So you had no background whatsoever in law. You had no knowledge of the law before you started. What was your background in?
Well, I'm a musician, and I was in construction. I did sales, renovation sales, and actually worked the tools as well. So I was kind of well-rounded that way. Athletic, played a lot of sports in high school and college, and just kind of a regular guy with a lot of, I had quite a few abilities, but law was not one of them. I may have had like a speeding ticket that I fought a couple of times, or parking tickets or something like that, but like nothing until the divorce. Then I was immersed in it. Yeah.
So is there something symbolic about the judge turning and leaving the room, or is that simply out of some panic that they were experiencing?
He panicked because of the way he ran out. He was moving, and but I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. The prosecutor asked me, he took me aside and said, "What do you want to do?" And just quietly to me. And I said, I want the charges dropped, because I didn't know what else to say. And he said, "No, we're not doing that." And then the judge came back in the room. So what I heard about that afterwards is, if a judge leaves the room, he comes back in with under a different name or a different authority. Now I didn't get to try that, because that's the only time that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But he did come back in after a brief recess, but he was still pretty nervous. There's no doubt about it. His body language was like he didn't want to be there.
So what was the thing that you did differently that put the fear to him?
I bonded the case. The case had been running for over a year, probably, with me trying to dodge it and, doing the name game and all that stuff. And then when I put a bond on the case, that was the turning point. And then we thought, well, when it first happened, I didn't know what was happening. Like literally, I was like, oh, does he have to go to the bathroom? That's what I thought. Like he had, and everybody else was looking at each other too, like what's going on? Like nobody seemed to know, right?
Yeah.
Except the prosecutor. He came to me, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what kind of question is that? And so that's how that came about. It was just another thing I was trying, really, on that day. Once I did it a couple more times and got similar but different reactions, but still very abnormal reactions from the judge, then we knew it was like, oh yeah, they're. And then the attorney general, making an announcement on TV, we got to raise the bonds on our judges. They're hardworking guys. I'm like, no, because I'm out bonding you guys.
So when he left the room and came back, you said that he came back with some other authority or under some other name. What does that mean?
Well, it's the theory is that you can come back. I think there's a couple ways of explaining it, and I'm going to probably make a mistake here, but you come back as a Levitical priest, and then if you come back the third time, you're coming in as a priest under Melchizedek, the order of Melchizedek. In law terms, I think you come back in the common, maybe in equity jurisdiction, and then if he goes out a third time, then he would come back in a common law. I might have those two backwards, but
interesting.
So there's a couple of ways of looking at it, but they do change they don't physically change anything, but They come back under a different capacity.
And is there an announcement of that? No. Like, how do you know that they've come back under a different authority?
You don't.
The idea is you don't, right?
Wild.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you don't know until you've been in there a lot and seen it over and over. And then you go, okay, that happened. And then this happened, that happened. And then this happened 3 times. And there's a correlation here, right? So you start to figure out their tricks.
Mm-hmm.
But it just takes a long time if you're not, somebody isn't teaching you. And even if they're teaching you, when I say this to you, you're going to go in there, oh, I don't know about that. That doesn't make any sense. But you have to see it 2 or 3 times. Then you go, oh, okay, now I see it. So, so there's a lot of teachings on that. And it's hard to figure out what I call patriot lore.
Yes.
And what has any basis to it. So.
Well, God help anyone that has a public defender.
Oh, so you're done.
I mean, that's just basically a pencil pusher who's just coming in to solidify whatever the judge is going to say. They're not really defending you.
No, that's how they get jurisdiction, is if you take the public defender, because then you've waived all your rights, and they don't have any problem just steamrolling over you, because you've kind of, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm giving it to this guy. Okay. And then they take it from there. I even I was helping my cellmate when I got out, and they were having trouble getting jurisdiction because I told them, don't say anything, but say very little. And he wanted to move to a jury trial, and the judge was kind of like, I think we're going to have to move to a jury trial. So then the public defender came in, and he happened to know my friend from high school or whatever. And he comes in and stands at the back and, may I be of some assistance? And the judge, like, yes. And looks at my friend and says, will you talk to that guy? And, oh yeah, I recognize him. Yeah, I'll talk to him. And I'm like, oh, no. So they went downstairs and they talked. And then he came back up, and then that public defender came down to where he was in the glass and just whispered something through the glass. It didn't even matter what it was. He just had to have the demonstration of it. Right on cue, another guy who had nothing to do with the case, he was a federal prosecutor, comes in with this very large book. Like, it's huge. And he's got it open above his head. Your Honor, this, I think this is pertinent to this case. He takes the book down there. She looks down at the book. We have jurisdiction, just like that. It's total play acting.
Theater.
Didn't read anything out of the book, but it had to do with the lawyer talking to my friend in the public, but they had to cover that up. So that's what I'm getting at, and you won't be able to figure this out unless you can see through it.
Yeah. Crazy.
Most people would have thought there was something in the book that gave it.
Of course.
It was really the lawyer.
It was all theater.
All theater.
It's in that most of mainstream law is a big bluff anyway. It's assuming that you have no idea what's going on, right? They
assume it, and most people don't know what's going on.
For sure.
We don't spend a lot of time in there. And because I spent a lot of time, my cases were usually called last. I saw a lot of cases if I sat there. And I saw a lot of judges. And you get to get the feel of each judge after you've seen them 50 times.
Right.
You kind of know them, without, we start to recognize each other because I'm in there all the time. So I'm like, I don't know their names, but I know that clerk and I know that, and then I would see them out on the, at a home show or whatever. Oh yeah, you're that guy.
It's so interesting because it's almost like the propaganda machine of television and the media uses shows like LA Law and SVU and all these shows to indoctrinate people. So they watch them and then they believe that they understand the law because they've watched a television show.
Yeah.
That's where I think I got it. I got it like even from Perry Mason going way back. And, the good always wins, and there's this justice thing wasn't happening in there. Like it was like, what is this? This is not what I thought it was, and I went through stages there. It's what I thought it was. Then through research, I found out what it should be. That didn't work either. And a lot of people get stuck there. Well, you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. Well, they don't. So there's got to be something else. And then there is what it is. And once you figure out what it is, that's when you can start to actually deal with it in actual reality.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they don't want you to speak their language.
Yeah, of course not. No. That's why they speak in this high Latin and have all these terms that the normal layperson will have no idea what they mean.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It happened in the church as well. It was another thing to, it was all very, like nobody was allowed to read the Bible themselves.
Right.
You had, the church told you what was in there and that was it and what to make of it. And until Bibles were being printed and then out to the lay people, nobody knew what was in there except what they were told.
Yeah. So is Latin a dead language or just a dead language to the masses?
Well, I think maybe years ago a lot of people probably spoke Latin.
Sure.
I think people were a lot more multilingual, but Latin does I look up words in Latin still today. Like I don't speak Latin or anything, but it does open up the meanings, like gives you a sort of a deeper meaning of English and French and any sort of Latin-based language, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just briefly back to the judge thing again, disappearing and reappearing. Do you have any idea what the origins of that practice are? And what kind of law that originated?
It was explained to me quite a while ago, and I can't remember why that happens. But there is a change, and it's based on 3. Everything's 3s. So I don't know what happens after that, but I can't remember the origin of especially on the Levitical and Melchizedek thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, does that have anything to do with a judge taking a recess?
Yeah, if they take a recess, if they go out of the room, they could be coming back in a different capacity, and you wouldn't know it. They don't tell you. So those that figure it out usually don't get it themselves into that. It's like since I figured out the game, I'm never invited there anymore, right? They just don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So like that's kind of what happens. If you kind of pull back the curtain, then they stop bringing you before the
Sure.
wonderful Wizard of Oz, right?
Yes.
But can you ask when they come back in, like what status that they've come back into the room?
You could ask, and the reaction will tell you something. You may not get the right answer, but the body language, if the judge is sort of surprised by that, you'll glean a lot, because I learned a lot from body language, not what was being said.
Right.
I'm not a body language reader or anything, but I could tell, like, no, you're saying this, but everything about you is giving off this other thing, right? So, and I would go with that and push on that, and that was usually the truth of the matter.
And you actually had judges and some police officers commending you for your line of questioning, right?
Yeah.
Like they realized you were onto something.
Yeah. And I didn't know that I was even on something, like going somewhere, but I was told, keep going. And I'm like, okay, didn't know I was going anywhere, right? I'm just asking questions. But I think there's some good people in that whole system. Not everybody's completely corrupt. And
Sure.
I think, they grow into it, and then they find themselves in a, but now how do I back out of this? I've got a mortgage, and I got, this is my career, and I can't just, so they kind of, stay low key. And, but others are very like vested in it and know what's going on. And there's rewards if you do certain things. And, if you want to move up the food chain, it gets pretty out there.
The higher you move up, the more corrupt. Yeah. Just like politics or just about any other institution in America or the world, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the piece that put it together for you, that helped you put the bond in place that made the judge leave the room, what set that into motion was coming upon something called Lex Mercatoria.
Right.
Yeah. So what is that?
It's the Lex Mercatoria means law merchant in Latin, and law merchant is a jurisdiction that was for the merchant class, and you can go way back in antiquity, but if you just start with the Middle Ages, you'll kind of get the flavor of it, because that's when a lot of the bills of exchange and all that kind of happened. So it was a set of rules or principles, and they weren't really written down like codified, but everybody understood them, and this is how it worked. And it was a way of international merchants to be able to trade together and feel safe, and there was some kind of body that was overseeing this, and they all agreed with these basic principles, and they kind of follow biblical principles. And the if there was a dispute, it happened very quickly, a matter of hours, not weeks and months. It was like, and the penalties were harsh, and so it kept the merchants honest with each other. So, like,
sure.
So almost like that old saying, "There's honor among thieves."
Yeah, sure.
It was like, it's kind of like that. I'm not saying they were thieves, but they were merchants, and they had this set of rules, and it worked very well for them. The issue was it started to get a little more organized as shipping started happening, and it sort of crossed over into this admiralty jurisdiction, and the goods got a lot larger, and the stakes got a lot larger, but it was still international trade. And so then they started having like fixed. Most of the courts were called pie powder courts, which was based on French, like the dusty feet of the merchants.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just at the international fairs at that level, and it was very informal, more vigilante type. Like everybody kind of policing themselves. As things got a little more larger and a little more organized, especially with stuff coming into ports, they set up staple courts, and it was still under law merchant, but there was a fixed building, and usually the mayor was the judge, and like a lord mayor. and it was a little more organized, but it still worked on those very fast principles. So if there was a dispute, especially if there was a boat involved, you had to have it settled before next high tide. Otherwise, that boat's gone, and you may never see it again in your lifetime.
Yeah.
So things had to move very quickly. So it was hours. Summonses were done 3 times, like 1 an hour, and boom, and starting at 9 o'clock, and you got a judgment by noon, that kind of thing. It moved very quickly. So people like that, and the common law was very arduous and took months of proving this and proving that, and so a lot of people liked the law merchant, the staple courts, better than the king's courts, and so they kind of fused the law merchant into the common law, and that's a key thing that people really need to understand, because they didn't tell us that. And it's still there. So the common law, all the law merchant stuff was now run through the common law, but they were allowed to run it as if it was law merchant. So the judges were to take judicial notice. If it's commercial, move in law merchant, move quickly. And now they call it summary judgment, or moving summarily. And it's based on a preponderance of things, not on facts. It's based on probability. That's all law merchant. It's still operating today, but people don't understand that. So that's why it's key to know that they did fuse it and then just stop telling everybody. So 300 or 400 years later, we don't know what law merchant is, let alone that it's operating. And that was the key. As soon as I started operating in law merchant, all of a sudden the judges are like, "Oh, okay, I don't want to play."
So obviously they knew about it. They were well versed in it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Most of them. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So how did that, what became the advantage of not being forthcoming about that process? Merchant law sort of being interwoven with the common law.
Well, if they're dealing with a merchant, then they don't have to have proof of anything. They can make judgments based on probabilities or assumptions, all that kind of stuff. So in the 30s, guess what happened? They started the birth certificate thing and turned everybody into a merchant. So now merchant law applies to everybody at the judge's discretion. That's how they've done it. And they don't tell you, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's a legal maxim. And so you walk in there as a merchant, and then they start with the name right away. And that's why that name game argument came up, because it's capitalized name, and that's your SIN number or SSN number is your merchant number. And you can't do anything without that merchant number, if you notice.
But there are ways, and you are living proof of that. There are ways around this sort of game. You've pretty much disengaged from that for the most part, haven't you?
I've disengaged from the system because I had to, like address and bank accounts and driver's license, all that stuff. I rescinded everything. But if you can learn law merchant, you can win, because that's what happened with me. I was just trying stuff, but really what it came down to, because one of the principles of law merchant is the truth prevails. Truth prevails in commerce. People may have heard of that. That's an actual thing. So, and truth is established by affidavit. So if you establish an affidavit, not just for common law, but you say, you have to answer this. And if you don't answer it, and then there's consequences. And if you make it monetary, you've just moved into commerce. So if you can't answer these questions of how you got authority, and you should be able to answer them, and then I'll give you 30 days. If you don't, and then you come and arrest me or force me to come to court, I'm going to charge you X amount of dollars a day. Do we have a deal? That's when and the way it works is, if what you're charging, if their bond doesn't cover it, it goes into their personal assets.
Wow.
And it gets
That's
serious.
why they're like, no, I'm done with this guy. Like, somebody else take this case. That's what starts to happen, you see.
So when you say you rescinded address and driver's license. How do you operate in the world? Because that's a common question that our listeners have that are kind of questioning this, making this pivot. Like, how do you travel? How do you engage in commerce if you don't use those documents?
Well, I'm lucky. Well, engage in commerce, there's this stuff called cash, which nobody uses anymore, but it's still around. And you can engage in commerce quite well with it. But they've made it very convenient where you just tap, it's so
right.
much easier.
Yeah.
And that's all on purpose to get those conveniences, drag you away from where you should be.
Yeah.
It's all to entice you down a certain path.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can engage in commerce with cash. Traveling, I'm lucky because I'm dual citizen, so I have a U.S. passport, but I live in Canada. So, but I would have figured something else out, and maybe even keep the passport if I need to travel. But you don't need a bank account. You'd be surprised how much cash can go in a shoebox. Like you'd be amazed at what I'm being very serious now.
No, I realize it.
When our grandparents or parents maybe started bank accounts, it was because you don't want to keep your cash under your mattress.
Yeah.
That's how they got you to start that whole thing.
Exactly.
But is it unsafe to keep your cash under a mattress? Really?
Yeah, I think not. A lot less unsafe than putting it in a bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, those that even have large, holdings, if you saw how, what $100,000 breaks down to in large bills, it's not a big pile of stuff. Like it really isn't. And even $1 million is not that big. So I'm not telling everybody to, pull their money out of the account, but think about these things. A lot of the conveniences of our lives are traps, and they're just slight little traps or a path that leads you down a certain way, and it takes you away from freedom, in my opinion. Yeah. So, and they're subtle. Even the mail is another thing. The stamp is for general delivery, because when we had little towns, you just went to the post office and you got your mail. Yeah. That has not gone away.
Right.
It's still there, but nobody uses it because there's this convenience that the federal government gives you. We'll take it from the post office and drop it in your mailbox. Oh, that's much better. Well, guess what? You now have an agreement with the federal government.
Well, how do you navigate the world of pieces of paper constantly being shoved in front of you, asking for your signature to get this goods or services or everything? Well, everybody wants a signature for any agreement.
I'll give you my scenario of the signature, and this is when I'm in jail. When a signature, I'm in a very oppressive situation. I have armed people telling me when I have to, where to go and what to do, and they want my signature. Well, they wanted my fingerprints first, and I said, well, I'm not voluntarily putting my fingerprints on that card. I said, you take my hand and stick it on there. I'm not going to fight you, but I'm not giving you my fingerprints. And so he took my hand, and he made it, if you don't stop fighting, I'm going to break your hands. And I'm like, dude, don't even try it. I'm not. He tried to pretend like I was resisting or something.
Right.
So finally got all my fingerprints on the card. Then he says, sign the card. I said, nope. And guess what? You can't take my hand and make my mark.
Right.
So what are we going to do?
Standoff.
Yeah. So, and this happened with the sheriffs too. When I was I wouldn't sign anything when I was in jail either. Right. I gave up a lot of conveniences. You don't get a lot of conveniences in there, but I couldn't take advantage of any of them because I wouldn't sign stuff.
Sure.
And I even got strep throat in there, and I couldn't go to the infirmary or to the doctor.
Right.
Because I would have to sign.
Right.
And so I toughed it out, and that can kill me. And so that's that's what I went through. So when the sheriffs are taking me to court, can you sign here? No. Well, then you can't get in the van. Okay, put me back in my cell. I don't want to go to court. You guys are making me go to court. If you don't take me to court, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like that. So you don't have to sign anything. Nobody can make you make your mark. Only you know how to make that mark. And only you can choose to do it. And you can choose not to do it. But I will tell you that your signature is being monetized left, right, and center. And when you see that, you'll start to recognize when that's happening. So don't sign the back of any bills, like you're paying a utility bill or anything. If somebody says, can you sign the back of it? Don't, because they're turning your signature into money.
I could see that easily happening too when you have to sign those little screens that just go directly to digital. Yeah, that would be very easy to monetize. How do they do that? What is that used for?
Well, if in Canada, it's very clear. I can show it very clearly, and that is the Bills of Exchange Act, Section 30. So even in the United States, you can look it up, and it will open your eyes that a blank piece of paper with nothing, with no other words to deny it or whatever, a blank piece of paper with a signature on it can be turned into a bill of exchange by the person holding it, the person who got the piece of paper. And a bill of exchange by definition is money. So your signature can be turned into money. If you put a signature on a blank piece of paper, somebody else can write in whatever they want around that signature, and it turns into money.
How can that? Who can do that, and how can they use it as money? How does that actually work? It just seems so abstract.
Well, how does a $20 bill turn into money? It's
sure.
It's literally a piece of paper with some ink on it.
Yeah.
If you just look at it,
for sure,
that's all it is.
Yeah,
and there's a signature on there, and so it's a bill of exchange.
It's interesting
because
bills
of exchange also go back into law merchant, and you got to understand when they needed to expand the money supply. How do you do that? Like, got to get more people to dig up more gold. Like, it wasn't efficient to rely on gold in order. I need to build 6 ships, because shipping is like, we got all these goods, so I got to build 6 ships. Well, who's got the money? Well, I don't. And so the merchants came up with this stuff, these things called bills of exchange, which are kind of like debt notes,
like an IOU.
An IOU. And so if you looked rich and you had your signature on a piece of paper that says I owe you, everybody went, oh yeah, that's good. I'll pass this around, like this'll. And so the merchants were just writing money out of nothing, whether they had the money to back it up or not.
It's interesting when you talked about the fingerprint. I noted I was traveling post 9/11 and I'd been out of the country, and to gain access to the United States again, they required you to give a thumbprint. You were not allowed back in the country unless you gave a thumbprint.
Yeah, you probably could have argued it if you wanted, because the passport doesn't say that. So the passport is quite clear about letting you in the country, and all you have to do is point that to your officer. It says right here, you have to let me in. Done. But most people don't do that. They just go through get it done. So,
well, it's like going through like a cattle car, like a cattle grate. They kind of make it this very prison-like environment intentionally that numbs you, and you just comply because everyone else is doing it, and you don't want to stir the pot, you don't want to make any waves, and you just want back in the fucking country. So it's like, okay, I'll just do it ignorantly, not really knowing what that then could be used for.
Yeah. So you have to start to be aware of these things. You have to be, okay, what is, because in my opinion, they're building a database of everybody's thumbprint, where they probably didn't have everybody's thumbprint unless you had some kind of criminal thing before.
Exactly.
Now,
Now it's an eye scan.
Yep. Yep. I ran into that in Toronto the first time, and this machine is like, you got to look right at it. And I tried all kinds of things, like looking above it. Nope, wasn't buying it. So, yeah, it was the first time I saw that.
So is it Patriot lore too when some I've heard some people say when you sign something, do it at all in small letters, or there's something that you can add, like a phrase in Latin or something that you can add to the end or the end of your signature or the end of your printed name. Does any of that stuff work, or just not signing? That's the only way out.
Not signing really works. Like all that stuff, I did most of that stuff under duress, without prejudice. None of that really works, in my opinion. I didn't see it working, like not the way I saw other things working. What will work is if you put non-negotiable across something, that works.
Wow.
All of a sudden, whoa, they pay attention to that. So
would that work on a check that somebody writes to you and you have to sign it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Or you can even say not negotiable past this transaction or whatever as well, right? Because what happens is these things pass around and they just keep regurgitating them.
It's interesting because the bank tried to move away from sending you your checks back. There was a period in time where my parents would get their monthly bank statement and it had every check that they'd written. That's now right. They want you to go paperless. And if you do write a check, they don't send it back to you.
Nope. They keep it because it's a bill of exchange, and they can sell it or trade it over and over and over. Like it just keeps going around and around. Some people that have gotten some of their instruments back have stamps from all over the world on them. But when they demand them back, and then they finally figure out where it all went, because somebody was really adamant about it, then they have to try and figure out where this thing went. And when they get it back, it's like stamped from here, there, like just everybody endorsed it, and it just kept going.
That's so fascinating.
This is all law merchant stuff.
Well,
we just don't understand what it is.
It's interesting to see how this has been this slow, insidious process, because I remember growing up in the 70s, going to the grocery store, to the local A&P in Overland Park, Kansas, and my mother having to write a check, and the arduous process that the environment made it feel like to write a check. And then you had a check cashing card. You had to get that in order to present with the check when you went to the grocery store. And it's slowly become this out-phased thing where we don't want that check anymore. We want to do the swiping and the scanning because it's quick. As you said, it's an easy thing. And people don't get frustrated in the line behind you because you're sitting there writing a check for $1.38 or whatever your cigarettes cost at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. But all that stuff is still happening. Like didn't go away. You can still write checks. They're still checking accounts.
Yeah.
We still call them that, but we don't write checks anymore, or very few. And everything's done with a card and, tapping and all that.
Because they've made it expensive. You don't get free checks anymore.
Nope.
Now it's $30, $40 to get one book of checks, and it takes weeks and weeks to get them. And if they've dragged this out where it seems like, oh, that's too inconvenient to do that.
Yep. And you can only take out $3,000 out of in cash. But I do that. Like I don't buy into that inconvenience. It's, when I was still working in sales and everything, if I had checks, I would just tell them make my check out to $2,995, and I would literally go to the bank of the company, 2 pieces of ID, and cash it like the old way. It's inconvenient, but that's what I would do, and I would organize myself accordingly, and that's just how I started to live. And the bank was constantly, why don't you just open up an account here and then we can just, transfer it over? And I, no, thanks.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, it'd be so much easier. Oh, yeah. Well, no, thanks.
And they charge you.
And then I started to get to know the tellers. This is not even my bank, but I'm in there so often that that might as well be my bank. But I don't have an account there. But I know all the tellers; they all know me, like even my first names. Oh, hi, Cal. And so finally, why don't you open a bank account? And I said, I'll tell you why. It's because if I open up a bank account here and you transfer the money from my boss's account to my account, the bank keeps the money all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And the eyes wide open. That's why.
Yeah.
I like it.
And now they charge fees if you don't have an account. It's like $10 to try to cash a check. Some banks won't cash a check that's been written on that bank. They can verify the funds. They still won't cash it. What do you think about writing a check to cash?
Oh, that adds a whole other, but that's still all legal. You can write it to cash or to bearer, and it's live just like a $20 bill, right? But yeah, the banks don't like that, but it's still valid. You can write a check to bearer, which means anybody, whoever's holding it, it's theirs. Like, cash it for them. You don't have to have ID.
Wow. A lot of people don't know that.
No.
I like it.
All this stuff is still happening, but we've been trained away from it. And as the younger generation, they don't have no idea what a check is. Like, they've never written one.
Yeah.
We were taught in school how to write checks.
Yeah.
And you could even make up a check if you didn't have the check, like as long as you had the routing number and I think I'm not even sure you had routing numbers back in the day, because they didn't even have branch banking back then. You just had the check and the bank that was drawn on and your account number, and that was it. Like, you could literally write it on any piece of paper, and it was valid. Still is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you alluded a couple of times to being in jail.
Yeah.
You want to tell the story of how all of that unfolded and what occurred because of it?
Well, I spent numerous nights in jail, and then numerous, hours in jail and back of police cars, like quite a bit. And then there was the same court case that I was talking about. I did a common law process where similar to a commercial process, but we weren't doing commerce back then. We were still doing either ecclesiastical or common law processes, still just as valid. So I asked them to prove that they had jurisdiction. They gave them 30 days. And I said, if you can't do it, then I'm not coming. That's my lawful excuse, which is on the summons. You have to show up such and such a time. You got to pay attention to this too. On such and such a date at such and such a time, unless you have a lawful excuse, and they don't tell you what that is. But we all assume, if I got in a car accident or something like that, but it's not. There's a thing called a lawful excuse, and you can create a lawful excuse. So I did that, and of course they were, being who they are, they just wanted to pick me up. So it held off for about a year and a half. Like, the case was pretty much gone and they were leaving me alone. And then one Friday afternoon before a long weekend, they came to my work and I got arrested and held without bail. And so I couldn't just sign my thing out, because they've seen me do that numerous times, and then I just don't come the next time. So they held me without bail. This is the first time I had spent more than one night in jail, and they didn't know that I could do it. I didn't know that I could do it because I'd never done it. And so they brought me in on Friday, and the prosecutor even said, well, let's keep him till Tuesday, because it's a long weekend. Let's see what he's like on Tuesday. So in other words, let's torture him. Right. And see if he changes his tune.
Yeah.
Well,
was this in Canada or in the States?
Okay. Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't change my tune. And so now they have a problem. They've got a guy in jail without bail. They don't know how to get out of that. And they couldn't get jurisdiction. So the trial should have been a one-day trial. It ended up being 2 days, but it took them 60.
Crazy.
Because they couldn't get jurisdiction, and I'm held the whole time.
Wow. So you were there for 2 months?
Yeah. And for the first week or so, my kids didn't know where I was.
Wow.
Because they wouldn't allow me a phone call, only to a lawyer. If you want to call a lawyer, you can call that, but no phone call. And so I'm in jail. Nobody knows where I am. I just disappeared.
Jeez.
Oh my
God.
God.
Like my work knows. Like there was one lady there, like the secretary. She knew. Yeah, I think she knew because I had to take the phone back in, or I think one of the officers had to take the phone back into the thing. So she knew something happened, but nobody else. And so my kids come home. They were minors, and where's Dad? I don't know. So I was appearing in court one time, and I brought this up. I said, you people, you arrested me, and even though I did a lawful process, and you've arrested me, held me without bail, and I have minor children at home, and they don't know where their dad is, and you guys are liable. And I would point right at the judge, and I'd point right at the prosecutor, and they're red in the face. And so there was a lawyer that I had seen quite a few times I didn't know he was a lawyer because he kind of hung around with the street people, and he didn't dress like a lawyer, but he seemed to be helping them in some ways. But he turns out he was a lawyer. And so I had seen him a few times over the months or years, and he seemed like a trustworthy guy. So anyway, he says, I was in cells, and he said, there's somebody that wants to talk to you. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to talk to anybody. So they brought me to where the lawyers can talk through the glass. And, and I recognized this guy. I said, I didn't know who he was, his name or anything, but I'd seen him. Mm-hmm. And he says, I was in your hearing today, and I heard what you said about your kids. He says, is there something I can do to
alert them? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd get a message. So I wouldn't give him my number or the kid's number, but I gave him my friend's number. I said, you call this guy, tell him what happened, tell him where I am. He will get
word.
Yeah. So anyway, the powers that be sent the child grabbers to get my kids.
Oh God.
And but here's the thing. My address is a P.O. box. And so they had this full entourage. I imagine they had cars and police and social workers, and this big thing all showed up at my mailbox, and they were mad the next day. And prosecutor goes, we sent child services to pick up his children, and it was a business. And I'm like, and so what? And the judge, like, no comment. Didn't ask where my house was. Like, no. You're still liable. You're still liable. And I said it pretty much every time I left court.
Because they probably
harm. I would go, you're causing me harm. You're causing my children harm. You're causing me harm. You're causing my children harm.
They probably thought that would be the straw that broke the camel's back, that they would basically abduct your children and that you would give up at that point.
Yep. But I didn't. I toughed it out, and I refused to sign anything, refused to answer to my name. They had to call me Teeny. Because they were going on about the name, and says, well, what did your parents call you? Because we're arguing back and forth. I said, well, I'm not sure that they actually were my parents, because I really don't have any evidence to, but I'm assuming that the man and the lady that were kind of around when I, became aware, I think they might have been my parents, but I have no proof of that.
Not on paper.
I literally have no idea. Uh-huh. But that lady called me Teeny. So when she yelled out Teeny on the front porch, that meant me. I'm supposed to go home to have supper. So if that's what you're asking, then my name is Teeny. And they all had to call me Teeny.
So they didn't really even know what your name was, what your identity was. How do they know they had
driver's license and all that? But but they have to get me to admit to it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
To get jurisdiction, and you see, because I'm arrested.
Yes.
See, when you walk into court, they can get jurisdiction just because you showed up.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're dragged there under, like with armed guards, whole other ball game. They got to establish it.
And if you, the living man, admits that, then
you're done.
Yeah.
So they asked my address every time I showed up, even in the divorce court. And they asked me every time if I wanted to have duty counsel, and he would always be in the room. Nope, no thanks. And one time they sent him. I'll back up a little bit. The sheriff. I'm in this holding, like when you're in the holding cells in the basement, and then when your case is about to be called, they stick you in a stairwell. And then this one room, one courtroom, there was a room that probably sat about 10 people, just with a bench. It would have fit, 10 or 12 people. And so I'm in there by myself, and the sheriff, again, to this play acting, he opens the door, and, the courtroom's right there. I can see, kind of see the judge, but I'm looking down, and he calls out Washington. And I'm looking down like he's talking to somebody else in the room. There's nobody else there. But that's my whole demeanor is like, well, it's not me. He's talking to some guy over there. Washington. And this is all play acting to see if I come out on the name.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there, Washington. Oh, I don't know. Somebody must have fell asleep over there or whatever. And then he goes, Teeny. So he knew. But he tried Washington 3 times, and then he said Teeny, and I'm like, oh, somebody called me, and I popped right up.
Yep.
And he looked at me like, oh. So I wanted to add that part because this guy was not on my side.
Right.
So a few seconds later, I'm in the penalty box, and the sheriff's now standing beside me, like, well, down below a little bit, but just right there beside me. And judge is over there and prosecutor, and then they started on this freebie lawyer thing again. And I said, no, thank you. And he was always the same guy. And he was an older guy. And no, thank you. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I don't want to speak to that man. Well, this time they tried to bring him right over. So he got up out of the galley and came over to the sheriff, who had just looked at me in disgust. And sheriff had papers ready. So this is all planned, hands my file to the sheriff, to the lawyer, and the lawyer puts it on the railing that I'm on and starts to point at stuff. And this is what I saw with actually, no, I was still in then, but I knew about that. So I knew they were trying to establish me talking to him. So I literally turned myself around and put my hands over my ears so that they could never say that I saw anything or heard anything he said. As soon as I did that, the sheriff started yelling, the prisoner doesn't want to, is indicating he doesn't want to speak to that man. And the lawyer took off, papers were flying, and he was running coattails, like, and he probably hadn't run in 50 years. Like, he was very awkward and hightailed the other. And I looked at the sheriff, and he's looking straight ahead, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, the way he said it was like, get away from my prisoner or you will get shot. You got through, like 2 seconds to get out of here. It was a command, and he wasn't talking to the guy. He was talking to the court, like out to the courtroom.
Right.
He's indicating that he does not want to speak to that man, and everybody's like, and it was a command. He was yelling, and I'm like, and this is the guy that was looking at me in disgust, like not 3 or 4 minutes before that.
Interesting.
All of a sudden, he's on my side.
Wow.
Yeah, it was weird.
So then, what happens?
So that was that. I was just trying to give you the thing about the lawyers. I stuck it, and they didn't get jurisdiction by getting me a lawyer. So then they tried changing the docket number to try and get away from my lawful thing that I had done. And they started with one time I came in and she goes, how do you plead to this? And I'm going, plead? The judge that ran out of the room,
right,
like 2 years ago, he put a plea in I said, a judge put a plea in this on this case 2 years ago. So you've changed the case. I looked right at the judge, and guess what? I don't see a summons on this matter. I don't see a warrant on this matter. I don't see any paperwork on this new case. She's like, red. I said, you're causing me harm. You're causing my children harm. You're causing me harm. You're causing my children harm. Adjourn, send them back to jail. And then they tried charged me with new criminal charges. So they waited all day, and you got to understand, like, get you up at like 4 a.m, so you're tired. You don't get to eat a good meal. It's a bag thing, and you're in a very dirty cell in the under the courts. They never clean them, like, ever, and it's just disgusting. And so you're not at your best. You haven't had a shower. Like, everything is against you, like, to make you not function. So they wait all day. My case is always at the last, and so they're coming to get me, going up the stairs, and then just before they put me on the stairs, sheriff goes, "Yeah, you're under arrest for criminal blah 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 blah." And I'm like reeling from this as I'm going in on the regular case, and it turns out I was on a new case, and so they charged me with obstructing justice and something along those lines, and I didn't do any of that stuff. So they were reading all these particulars. He looked like he was going to run. This is on my arrest day, right? He looked like he was going to run, and I went, "What is that?" I looked, so I was in a runner stance, or like
you had running shorts on.
Yeah, I know, like spikes. Yeah, what was it? So I knew this was trumped up. So I appeared on that I think 3 times, and my friends could never find it. I was always in the courtroom by myself, just judge, sheriff, and clerk and prosecutor. And they kept trying to get me to get a lawyer. These are serious charges. These are criminal charges. You need a lawyer. No, thanks. And on the last time I appeared, the judge, she could tell she wasn't getting jurisdiction. She was quite calm and cool about it, like, too, as well. Like, she was very, these are very serious charges, And no, thanks. Well, the trial's going to start. Are you available? And I wouldn't answer. I wouldn't say, yes, I'm going to come, or no, I don't want to come. I would just pull my red shirt up and go, prisoner's indicating he doesn't really have any choice. Again, you said that, not me. I just did this, right? So I wouldn't agree to anything or disagree with anything. So anyway, she goes to the prosecutor. So what courtroom is this going to be in? Because they're going to start the trial. And she goes, "Well, it's going to be in here." And the judge, "Well, no. Why does it have to be in here?" "Well, because you've got the glass thing for prisoners." And she goes, "He's not in there now," because I'm sitting at the desk. "He's not in there now. Like, why all of a sudden is that important? He has to be in there because he's sitting right here now." Well, anyway, blah, blah, blah. And so judge starting to lose her cool a little bit. And so she adjourns the case, and they put me back in the stairwell. Well, normally the sheriffs open up the bottom of the stairwell and you go right out. Well, they didn't. So I'm sitting there on the stairs near the top of the door. And a few minutes goes by. The judge figures I'm gone. Well, I'm not. I'm just on the other side of a door. She comes back in, and she was losing her poop. I mean, screaming hysterically at the prosecutors. I went, "Whoa, not so cool." And so I went, "Oh, so things aren't so happy over here about this case." And so when the trial was supposed to start, my cellmate was getting up for his case, and I got up for mine. Like I said, 4 a.m, and so I'm getting up. He walks out the door. Or the guards open the door, and I start going out. He goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I got court today." "You're not on the list?" "Okay." Just went back to bed. So they just disappeared.
Wow.
So what were the initial charges when they came to your work and arrested you?
Driving without insurance.
What? That's what all of this was about?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
And you were in jail for 2
60
months.
days. And the sheriffs under the court were like, "Washington, you're still here on a driving thing?"
Oh my God.
Like, they were appalled.
And that seems as good a place as any to end the first free hour.
Wow. Who would have thought that a natural law complaint or argument would actually turn into spiritual warfare?
Me?
Intense.
Yes, very intense. Cal has definitely suffered for his knowledge. And unfortunately, I think that's how a lot of worthwhile knowledge is arrived at. Not that he went out searching for it, but in the process of becoming more aware of this stuff, he certainly has crawled through a lot of broken glass to get there. So it's well earned, and completely without ego. I can tell by looking him in the eyes that he's not here to beat his own chest. He's here because he knows it's the right thing to do. And that makes all the difference.
I see such a pivotal switch happening because of what's happened to him. And when you think about it, many great movements start that way. Like there's one person who's willing to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to comply. And I think the fact that he did that just really shows that the manipulation is really about creating duress and putting you in a situation where powerlessness seems like the only position that you have, and the only tactic you can take is to just submit to whatever's happening. And what he showed was that, yes, it is painful and there is sacrifice that has to be made. But in doing that, what you're doing is you are strengthening, you are really strengthening and embodying this essence of who you are as a human, as a man, as a woman. And that's really what we're here to do. It's not to bow down to our oppressors or to be serfs. This is not what the human spirit is designed for. And we have allowed, as a culture, we have allowed these bad actors to take control. And what he's showing us is it's so easy to get it back.
Absolutely. Duress and ignorance, I might add, too. Most of this is on a bluff, and it's counting on the fact that we don't know shit about what is being talked about over our heads that directly has to do with our fates, really. And these bad actors also are the same ones that are not only in positions of power, but they control most of the media that many of us steep ourselves in. So they've got the narrative fucking covered on all sides and make it very, very hard purposefully to find the core of where a lot of this stuff comes from, the natural law.
Well, do you notice that the transition in the past 30, 40, you could even say 50 years, has been this move away from biblical law and a move into atheism and a move into transhumanism. Yep. So things that come from the Bible are considered outmoded. It's considered old-fashioned. It's considered not progressive. If you believe in God, if you believe in some higher spirit or some higher force that's outside of yourself that is empowering you. And I find that so interesting because I think, again, all of this is by design. It's designed to be like, oh, well, you're not sophisticated if you're a Christian. You're not sophisticated if you believe in the Bible or if you read the Bible. And so I think the intent of that people that are in that judicial system and in that web is to be transhuman, to be atheistic, because then the power is not the power of the truth, which is with the big T, doesn't apply to them. They can bastardize the law to suit their needs and rely on people's ignorance and rely on people's lack of spirituality or understanding of God's law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fell into that trap too of, thinking Christianity was uncool and the Bible's is just handed down from many ages, mistranslated, blah, 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 blah. But I'm really starting to see something to that. I mean, you can go to one extreme, which Mr. Richardson, for some reason I'm totally blanking.
Clint?
Yes, Clint Richardson was at it, seeing when he was saying that the Bible is a law book and that there are just a bunch of fables in there, and they're all symbolic of metaphors that are about natural law and the order of things. Whereas Cal, I think, takes the Bible more literally, but arrives basically at the same place. And I think that there is still a part of me that resists that narrative for some reason. I think because I have been shown bad examples of it all my life, of Christianity, right, Christian behavior, so on and so forth.
Right.
I'm now seeing many examples of much more positive aspects of that, and that there's something going on there. I'm going to start reading the Bible.
I think what we have to separate is religion from the Bible, because there are people who call themselves religious, but they don't live by the rule of God, and they don't live by the rule of natural law or common law. Mm-hmm. So I think that's where we have to bifurcate the subject, is that one thing does not beget the other. You can read the Bible and not be a Christian. You can read the Bible and look at it as a law book. I think the interesting thing is understanding that your spirituality, the thing that has mesmerized you, and I'm using the universal, not you specifically,
of course,
but the thing that has mesmerized people is this dark energy, this thing that we would call the devil or Satan or Lucifer. This is the magician that comes in and is, one is on one shoulder and one's on the other. And what they're saying to you is, oh, don't listen to that, or don't, read that, or don't think that or believe that, because it's drawing you into this darkness. And a lot of what Cal is talking about specifically is that other archangel on his shoulder that's whispering in his ear, and he's listening to that and using that as his guide. And look at what happened when he embraced that. It's really amazing, like the level that went to, like all the way up to the queen. Yeah. So he's having a spiritual war that goes multi-generations. Think of how many people who have died at the hand of the monarchy. Like, this is not just one dude. What it shows is, look at what one person can do.
And believe me, we've just skimmed the surface. There's much more below. There's so much more to dig into. And I really naively thought we would cover more of that, but I think it was much more important to go through these few main stories of Cal's sort of blossoming into the person that he is today, and then moving on to other things, because there's so many levels to this. And I got the opportunity to ask questions that I didn't hear anybody else ask, as far as digging in deeper to these details that just kind of in other conversations went by in a flurry. And I was like, wait, why didn't you ask him more about that? So I would rather I'm glad that we got to go through the few stories that we did in great detail, as opposed to cover more things. There's time for that. We'll have him back for sure for more conversations. And also you got to give Cal props, because he basically, I don't know how I crossed my brain pathways, thinking that the document that he gave the Queen had something to do with a notice of liability form. that we all now sort of take for granted and don't even realize what the origins are. But he's the dude that pinned that. He's pretty much the guy that came up with that. So, I mean, that's outstanding. That's such an important form in many people's lives. They're finding out, and I want to find out too. And I want to ask him about a particular situation of mine, about our smart meter. In giving people through merchant law the ability to stand up against these things that most people don't even think that we can stand up against. So that is very empowering, and I now see where they got the title for that organization.
I would love, dream show would be to have Cal and Brandon Sibley and Clint Richardson on at the same time and really give them the opportunity. I mean, that would have to be like a 3-hour show where they each got an hour.
At least.
Where they could each explain their the road that they are on in terms of natural law and common law and how they navigate and move through that. Because I think we're getting, it really does feel like the tip of the iceberg. Like there's a pinhole that has been penetrated through this firmament that we're in, and on the other side of that is the truth. And we keep taking our pins and pricking different parts of it, but I want to break that open. I want to really see and understand and absorb what each one of these men has to offer and what they are sharing, because I think they all have their own approaches and there is a common thread between all of them. But I think it would be so great to just hear them commiserate and kvetch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Boy. And just stay out of their way.
Exactly.
Open the episode and then close it, and then they do everything in between.
Yeah. With maybe just like a few like guidelines, like these are the things we want to try to cover.
Or maybe we do some sort of what would be the word for it? Like, what's the thing that you watched that was like a weekend or something with Josh Del Sol? What was that? The Event or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Like do like an event.
Yeah. Do our own version of that, where we have these people speak and give them each...
Exactly.
Yeah, as much time as they need. Well, maybe not as much time, but maybe 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's great about the event. And what I really love about it is that I think all of those interviews were pre-recorded, and then they just put them on a platform, and on the sidebar, you have a chat where people that are viewing can actually engage with each other, not necessarily with the people asking or being interviewed or giving the talk, but it gives people an opportunity to talk to a moderator who maybe can give a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, I like that idea. You heard it here first.
That's right.
Okay. Is there anything else that you want to say?
I feel so blessed and so grateful to have you, Chris, in my life and to be a part of your life. And likewise. I just love you so much. And you have just given me so much of an opportunity to express myself and to learn and grow. And I just feel like a lifetime of this open-ended discussion that we are having in our relationship. I just see there's such beauty in that, because we get to include other people in this process and we're learning, and that's what I think we're here for. So I just thank you.
Likewise. I could say the exact same thing for you. I don't know why I didn't start doing this podcast with you in the beginning. I think really truly what it was is I thought that you would just, I would become redundant, because you're such a interlocutor. Is that what it's called? You're so good at engaging people and drawing them out and getting them to talk about stuff that I thought you would just overshadow me. But I'm so glad that we're now doing it together, because it's just another aspect of our lives together. And I'm very, very thankful for you too.
We're very lucky people.
Absolutely.
And I'm so appreciative of the people who are sharing this journey with us, the listeners, all of our guests, our friends and our families. We are just two extremely blessed people. And thank you guys for being here with us on this journey.
Absolutely. We love you and we appreciate you listening, and hopefully you were able to gain and glean many positive things from this conversation. I know that I did. Until next time, don't forget to hit what do they call it? Smash that subscribe button. Go to YouTube and subscribe to us. If you do anything in this life, do that.
Share,
no, really.
share.
That's just one thing. Yeah, get the word out. Spread the word. Let's make this conversation among more people.
And even if you don't share it with anyone, just your presence means so much to us. It just really, it warms my heart to know that people get it. They get what we're trying to do here. This is not about fame. This is not about fortune. It's not about any of that. This is about inspiring thought. And we are just so excited that you're here with us and that you may absorb even 1/10 of what has been said and embody that in your life in some way.
Absolutely. Amen. What she said, eh? All right. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Sweet dreams.
Meow.
To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.